slideshow. Right, the rationale for this presentation is not to give you a full guided tour of Oxbridge, Oxford and Cambridge, what it looks like, what student life is like, and so on. I've done that before, but I thought today it would be more useful if I talk to you about what you need to do to prepare yourself for a successful application. That's I think, what the purpose of this is today. So I'm not going to show you beautiful pictures of people punting on the can or dining in hall, though we can talk about that later. What I want to do is give you some hints about the sorts of things you need to be doing to prepare yourself for a successful application. And remember, these are highly competitive universities, so however good you are, there's always a chance that you won't get in, but you can improve your chances by doing the right things. So the first thing to say is, what are Oxford and Cambridge looking for when they admit somebody to the university or to their college, which I'll talk about in a minute? The first thing is that they really want you to be passionate about your chosen subject, the subject you are applying for. This is very different from an American application where you apply to the university and they're looking for general ability and what you can bring to the community, the campus community. Oxford and Cambridge are really not interested in that at all, and I will explain why in a moment. They are interested in, are you genuinely passionate, and can you demonstrate your passion for your chosen subject? But that is not enough. The fact that you really love history or engineering or whatever is not enough. You need to be able to think and write about it analytically, and they're going to be testing you for that. And they don't think you have to be the finished article at this point. Otherwise, there'll be no point in going to university. They want to see that you have got potential for development. And then the last of these four things is, are you suitable for the supervision or tutorial system? Just a quick word about what that is. In Cambridge, they're called supervisions. In Oxford, they're called tutorials. What this means is that every week, you and perhaps one friend or two, very rarely more than that, will meet with your tutor stroke supervisor and discuss an essay or some problems, if you're a scientist, that you have prepared for this supervision. So it's 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-3 teaching. And you have got to be able to cope with the pressure there and be original. The teaching isn't based on, I am going to tell you these things, you write them down and regurgitate them. No, the teaching is based on, let's think about this together, and the teacher will say, I'm interested in what you've got to say as much as you're interested in what I've got to say. So it's very much a dialogue, the supervision tutorial. So it's very important. One of the things they really want to know is, are you suitable for this system? And this is why the entry, the hoops you have to jump through in the entry process are as they are. Sorry, I've now lost the presentation. Here we are, and that's not what I wanted. Okay, let's go. Aha, sorry about this. Here we are, great. Okay, now, in elite universities in other parts of the world, America, for instance, you are the person who makes the decision, or it's a committee that makes the decision, is a group of admission professionals whose career it is to decide on who to admit to the university. This is not the case at Oxford or Cambridge. You will be admitted to the university by the people who will teach you in the supervisions and the tutorials. That's why they are interested in whether you are passionate about the subject, and they're not so interested in whether you're good at rugby or whether you can act or whether you're musical, because honestly, they don't want you to be too distracted. Obviously, people do those things, but they don't want you spending all your time acting, although some people obviously do, and not writing the essays that you will you have to present to them once a week. And as you probably know, Oxford and Cambridge are collegiate universities. That is, each of them is a conglomeration of self-governing colleges of between 300 and 900 students, with senior members and postgraduates as well. And you apply, or if you apply to a college, or you apply with an open application and you're allocated to a college, but it is the college that admits you, not the university. And once you're a member of college, you're automatically a member of the university. And the people who in each college are admitting you for their particular subject, their criteria are entirely academic. And this is where we need the supercurricular, which is what I'm going to talk about next. I'm sure you've all heard of extracurricular activities: sport, music, drama, MUN. There's a huge range of them. They play almost probably no part in admission to Oxford and Cambridge. What does is your passion for your subject, and the way you can demonstrate your passion is by doing supercurricular activities. So if you want to be a music major, playing in a good orchestra would be a supercurricular activity that enhances your application. If you want to read physics, wouldn't really be, well, physics possibly, maths possibly, but if you wanted to read archaeology, it wouldn't really interest them that much. But if you wanted to do music, then yes. So if you wanted to read philosophy, study philosophy, Oxford and Cambridge talk about reading subjects rather than studying subjects. So for instance, I read classics at Cambridge. In other universities, you say I studied classics at that university. So if you do extra reading and research in your favorite philosopher and you want to be a philosophy major, that will enhance your application. If you're a history major, these are just examples. If you're a history major, you volunteer in a local museum or archive, as long as you've got something interesting to say about it, something you've learned about history from these activities, that will enhance your application. If you're a science major, a summer internship in a lab, a research project in your favorite subject for any major. MUN would count if you're an international relations major, as long as you got something out of it. It's not enough to say, I attended XYZ MUN conferences. No, you've got to show, and this will come up in the personal statement, that you have learnt useful things for your subject from it. And something like mentoring younger students in math would be helpful for a math or science major. There's a vast range of things that are extracurricular. These are only, supercurricular. These are only examples. But I want you to get a clear idea of how important the supercurricular is, because Oxford and Cambridge are looking for students who've gone beyond what they've been taught at school. If you've done it in the classroom, all well and good, but that doesn't show a passion for the subject. What shows a passion for the subject is being supercurricular. So, the elements of the application, there are 7 or 6, depending on the subjects and the college, and each of them is scored out of 10, and they're all added together, and that's used as a basis for discussion among the lecturers. They're called dons at Oxford and Cambridge, the dons who are going to make your decide on your admission or not. So they're going to look at your existing grades, your predicted grades, your personal statement, the reference. This will be scored, but they won't be scoring how well your teacher has written it. They'll be scoring what they can get out of it about you and the subject. There's often an entrance test, but not for all subjects. Some of these entrance tests, many of these entrance tests take place in early November at your school, or some take place when you're called for interview. Submitted work, especially in the humanities and social sciences, you're asked to produce work that you've been produced for your school course. And then if all of these are satisfactory so far, you will be invited for interview, although you might be deselected at this point and not invited for interview. Can I just say that I'm talking a lot at the moment, and if anybody has questions as I go along, obviously there'll be questions and answers at the end, please do say so, raise your hand. So in terms of the existing grades, you need to present yourself as a student who has already achieved highly. So depending on the curriculum you are following, it could be the transcript grades of your Turkish or other diploma. Though neither Oxford or Cambridge accept a Turkish diploma on its own, you need further study such as APs. Existing APs that you've already taken, and of course SATs that you've already taken, which are at a grade good enough for entry to Oxford and Cambridge. IGCSEs, if any of you take them, middle year program of the International Baccalaureate. Sometimes people take exams. If you've got good grades in those exams, then you can use them. So this is the first thing that they look at and will score, your existing grades. Then they will look at your predicted grades. And if your predicted grades given to you by your school do not match the standard or the minimum offer, then you will not be made an offer, nearly always, most unusual. So there's a difference between a standard offer and a minimum offer. Oxford has standard offers, Cambridge has minimum offers. The standard offer at Oxford cannot be varied by the individual college. So if history, it's 38 points with 666 at higher level, every single college, if they decide to make you an offer, will make you that exact offer. And the whole process at Oxford is the same at every college. Cambridge, the colleges are a little bit more independent. And so the Cambridge colleges have the discretion to increase or decrease the offer. So, for instance, I do remember a student of mine back in Norwich who wanted to do art history at Cambridge. The minimum offer was A star, AA. She was predicted A star, A star, A star, 3 A stars at A level. So they offered her 3 A stars, which was a bit of a shock to her when it came, but she did get it, in fact. So so Cambridge can give you a higher offer or indeed a lower offer, depending on how they feel. So, I mean, I've just given you a couple of examples. These are all available on the websites. If you're doing the IB and you want to do history at Oxford, it's 38 points with 666 at higher level. If you want to do PPE, it's 39 points with 766 at higher level. And with most of the sciences, it's 40 points with 766 or 776 at higher level. The difference between the 766 and the 776 will be whether you're taking higher level maths or not.
I just wanted to interject. They might want to know what PPE is.
Oh, philosophy, politics, and economics. Sorry, I thought that was the most famous course at Oxford, which everybody wants to take.
Yep.
Philosophy, politics, and economics. And if you're doing advanced placement, your high school GPA will be relevant, a high score in the SAT, and 4+ APs at 5. And then for Cambridge, it's the International Baccalaureate is usually between 40 and 42 points, and the advanced placement is, as with Oxford, but it's 5 APs rather than 4. So you need these predicted grades in the bag to have any chance of an offer. And of course, when you get the offer, if you don't actually make these grades when the exams happen, you lose the offer nearly always. There are exceptions, but it's much better to get the predicted grades than not. You have to write a personal statement, which is your chance to tell the story of your engagement with your subject. And it is a story, really. And it is your chance to display your supercurricular activities. So you have to answer 3 questions in your personal statement, not explicitly, but the person reading it has to be able to infer the answers to these questions. Why is this person applying for this course? Because they really enjoy it and they've shown that they really enjoy it. What have they done to prepare themselves? What supercurricular activities have they done? Extra reading and so on. And do they know what they're getting themselves into? Okay, so when I read classics at Cambridge, every week I had to write an essay for my supervisor. And the reading list was usually 20 books long. And you had to digest the important parts and then answer the question, which, as I say, writing analytically, defending a thesis, and showing what your evidence was and so on. If you've done a lot of reading, you're showing that you know what you're getting yourself into, because studying at Oxford and Cambridge is tough. They have shorter terms than other universities, but they cram twice as much work into those short terms. Then you need a reference, which is written by your school counselor, or if you don't have a counselor, the principal or your form teacher or somebody who knows you well. And it needs to be a combination of the subjects that are relevant for the subject you're applying for. So for instance, if you're applying for engineering, you need a contribution from your maths and your physics teachers, perhaps a bit of chemistry thrown in, and so on. So it will depend on what you want to study, and you should discuss this with your school counselor or equivalent. I spend a lot of my time with my students discussing who they want to contribute to their reference. And the questions that the referee has to answer are what sort of school you are and how you fit into the school. Are there any special circumstances? At the moment, of course, it's COVID, but there are other special circumstances students have. How reliable are the predicted grades? Are they based on lots of testing or not? Then your teachers need to talk about your skills in your relevant subject and, most importantly, your potential as a university student. Then, at that point, with other universities, you'll have finished. But Oxford and Cambridge continue to make life difficult for you. So you have to take, often, not always, not all courses require it, but many do, an entrance test, which is usually on the first Wednesday or Thursday of November. You can take it at your school if your school is a designated centre or another designated centre. So I think the British Council in Istanbul, for instance, run the Oxford and Cambridge exams. And so, there's BMAT, biomedical admissions test for medicine, TSA, the thinking skills assessment, MAT, that should read MAT for math, not for medicine, ELAC for English, English literature aptitude test, and so on. So it's either in November, or some courses, especially at Cambridge, if there isn't an entrance test that everyone has to do in November, some colleges at their own discretion will have a test when you go for interview. And for law, if you're going for Oxford, there is a test called LNAT, which is valid for lots of other top universities for law in the UK, and you have to take that before the 15th of October. Cambridge has its own law test. Now, what they've all got in common is what they're trying to do is to see how you can apply your knowledge in unexpected ways. So they're not seeking to find out, in history, for instance, do you have a lot of historical knowledge? They're trying to find out, do you have the skills needed to do history? So what they do is give you a piece of reading, source that you've never seen before, and ask you to interpret it as a historian would. What information can you get out of it? Then, for mostly for the humanities and social sciences, you need to submit some work that you've written in the normal course of your studies at school, and send it to the college. They will give you a date and say, we want to see your work by this date. It must be in English. So either come to an agreement with your teacher that you can write something. If you're studying a subject in Turkish, you might either have to translate it or write something in English for him or her to mark or grade. And again, they're trying to see if you can write analytically. Can you take a thesis and defend it and come to a conclusion by using well-argued paragraphs? And the reason they ask it to be marked or graded is hopefully your teacher will put in the margin some suggestions about things you might not have thought about or things you might improve. And what they're asking you to do is, if you go to interview, they might say, I see your teacher has said X, you should go into this in more depth. How did you react to that? And at that point, you will say, yes, well, I looked at this in more depth, and this is what I found out. The skills they're wanting are often different from those taught in Turkish schools. The style of writing is different, so preparation for this is required. I know this from my experience of teaching Turkish students. And the test, the most important thing to realize at this point is the test and or the submitted work will decide whether an interview is offered. So you've got through all these hoops so far, and then you come to the interview, which is meant to be a mini tutorial or supervision. So I talked to you about the tutorials and supervisions earlier. They last an hour, typically. Your interview will last from between 20 minutes to half an hour. And in maths, they will give you problems to solve. And they won't be interested in the ones that you can solve straight away. They'll start paying attention when you get a problem that you can't answer straight away, solve straight away, and they want to see how you think it through. In science, often they will give you an experiment and see whether you see how that experiment could be improved. That they will give you the write-up of an experiment. In humanities and social science, often they will give you an unseen piece of text, which they'll give you half an hour before the interview starts, and then they will ask you to discuss it in the interview. So the interview is not so much what you know, but how to apply what you know in new circumstances. So the crucial thing is not to be upset by new and difficult material. So for instance, if you're a brilliant mathematician and you can always solve it, what's put in front of you, the important thing is not to freeze when you're given something you can't do, because that's what they're interested in. And that's why it's always important to think out loud during your interviews. Oh, this is interesting. I haven't seen this before. Not entirely sure how I should approach this. What about this? And of course, they'll then start to give you hints, and they'll be listening to see how well you pick up on the hints. So it's important to practice this. So with a bit of luck, after all those steps that you have to go through, in January, you will receive an offer, and then you have to work very hard for whatever it is you're doing. Actually, the people with APs and SATs are often in the best situation, because they often have reached the offer already, whereas people doing IB still have to take the exams and get the whatever it is between 38 and 42 that they need. So good luck, and that's the end of my presentation, and I'm now ready to hand back to Yejin and wait for questions.
Well, of course, we'll take questions, but I want to throw one at you, and it's one I really want to have you perhaps elaborate on, because we've seen some of the schools in Turkey, some of the schools who we would think prepare their students at the highest level within the Turkish system, still not always succeed, right? There's a lot of examples of that. Can you talk a little bit about writing? And yeah,
well, the style of writing I've seen coming out of Turkish schools isn't the style of writing that they're looking for in Oxford and Cambridge, because it's what they're looking for is the ability, as I was talking about earlier, to write analytically, which means take a thesis and defend it by giving reasons and refuting the counter arguments. And I've seen a lot of work from Turkish schools, which is very descriptive and does not have the basic format where you take a thesis and defend it and come down on one side or the other for good reasons. So yes, so that's something that I've seen people with very, very good qualifications, but not that, ultimately not succeed because they fell short at that point. This is particularly for the humanities and the social sciences. I hope that helps.
It helps immensely. So the next question should be, and I apologize from the audience, I don't want to ask all the questions myself, but if you were a Turkish student, say from Robert College or Üsküdar or, Koç or one of those, everybody has a, I've seen where people in the room go to school, it's all those schools. What should they do? How should they prepare, do you think? What would your advice be?
Well, I mean, with all the writing parts of the application, they need help from somebody to get inside the cultural mindset of the people who are going to be admitting you to Oxford or Cambridge. So for them to see your potential, they need to be able to see that you have got the ability to do the sort of thing that you're going to have to do when you go there. You're going to have to write an essay like this every week. So yeah. So
if you had to guess, how long would it take teaching a typical Turkish student that method?
I think that's a very good question, which I don't think there's one answer. I think, because of course everybody will start from a slightly different place, but I think a diagnostic test would then be able to say, okay, this is what you need to do. And also, what I find is that people have been brought up in a particular academic tradition, and they find it very difficult to change their mindsets. So it will also depend on how flexible the student is to look at different things. And of course, flexibility, mental flexibility, is something that Oxford and Cambridge are particularly looking for. So, I mean, I had a student not that long ago who we were able to do his personal statement in 2 or 3 sessions because he had immediately that mental flexibility.
Yeah.
But others, it takes 3 or 4 months, depending, and it depends on the student.
Yeah. It's good. So one major takeaway I have, and not just from this discussion, but just working with Francis so far, is that there is as much to do on the school side as there is on the students. Unfortunately, we can only control things, from the student side here. So that's what we're talking about. I see a question come in. What are the common mistakes you see during the application?
Not understanding what you need to do for the personal statement. So I've seen people try to write an essay like as they would for America, which is completely different. So you've got to answer those 3 questions I've talked about, and not starting early enough. Most people who get into Oxford and Cambridge have always been interested in their subject, and they don't just look around and say, And we did see what one student who said, well, I want to apply for X, but I think it'll be easier to get into Y, therefore I'm going for Y. They'll see through you immediately. I mean, don't do that. So you're the sort of person who really likes their subject and has been reading around it for a long time. Now, starting in January before your application, you really need to focus on getting the things in place. And writing descriptively rather than analytically. I think those are the major things I can think of now, the major mistakes.
Those are great examples. I see Ida is asking, is volunteer work a necessary factor for entry into Oxford and Cambridge alongside school?
Not at all, not in the slightest, apart from medicine. Yeah. Can I go back? The only thing they're interested in is your passion for your subject. It's not like America at all. Volunteer work's great to do. You should be doing it, but it's not gonna sway a decision in Oxford or Cambridge, with the exception of medicine and veterinary medicine, where you've got to have done a lot of volunteering to get the experience in order to do it. Okay, you apply for architecture. If you volunteered to work in an architect's office, that will be supercurricular. That will show your passion for your subject. But they're not going to be they will be impressed, but it won't go into their decision if you've been helping people out. Great, but it's not going to sway their decision.
Good question. Oh, here's another one. I'm just reading these guys. Sarp Turker is asking, how should we start preparing for the application? Should they start with specifics such as the exams like TSA and the interview, or should they focus on their intellectual?
Well, TSA, the interview comes later. Mm-hmm. TSA, yes, you need to start preparing. It's a very tricky exam, and you've got to score very highly on it. So the sooner you can start preparing for the TSA, the better. But in other subjects, it's making sure that you are studying and reading around your subject beyond what your teachers are making you do in class.
Perfect. Do you typically, when you work with students to help prepare them, one thing you mention a lot is reading lists, right?
Yes.
How do you approach that process? I just threw in my own question.
Well, I think it will, again, it depends very much on the student. So what you do is you build a reading list around their existing interests, mm-hmm. but try to take it further. So with a historian, you try to talk, not just read history, but read different periods of history from the one that they're interested in, and actually look at some philosophy of history. Look at some answering the question, when I'm doing history, what am I doing? What are the different schools of history? As an example.
Perfect. So it seems there's this void for the Turkish students in the Turkish curriculum in these writing skills. So it seems like it would make a lot of sense to have some sort of supplementary help outside of their schools that that offers
with the writing skills. I think, well, that's my experience so far.
So perhaps this is something we could offer to Turkish students.
Yeah, I can. I've been doing this for years, so I could certainly offer it.
So if they're interested, what should they do? Should they just send me an email and then?
I think they should send you an email, and then
we'll see how many are interested. And wait, Ibola has one question. If we want to apply to, you can take yourself off mute. if we want to apply to slightly different majors in UK universities, how do we manage to write that's a classic, write a personal statement that that applies to all?
Basically, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
If they're slightly different, you'll probably get away with it. But if they're majorly different, now there are some exceptions to this. I think Durham and Exeter allow alternative personal statements. Cambridge, which has got some courses that don't exist anywhere else. So human, social, and political sciences is quite rare. Land economy is quite rare. You write a personal statement which is going to be relevant for your other 4 choices, and then Cambridge gives you an opportunity to write a supplementary personal statement which says why you want to do that particular course in Cambridge. But if you want to apply for 3 universities law and 2 universities history, that's going to be very difficult. Mm-hmm. If you're doing, say, maths and philosophy, and the other universities are going to be just math, then you can talk about math, but then you should show some interest in perhaps the philosophy of math and math's relation to philosophy, which won't raise a red flag with the other universities. So slightly different, okay, as long as you write it skillfully. Majorly different, if you write a history personal statement, you're going to be rejected by all the lawyers. If you write a law history statement, personal statement, you're going to be automatically rejected by the historians.
I've got to add on to Ibola's question. So let's say you did one of these very one-off majors. You wanted to apply to Cambridge for something nobody else offers, but then you have your other schools in the UK to apply to. So what does that look like?
So for Cambridge, it's easy.
Yeah.
Because Cambridge has got the SAQ,
yeah,
the supplementary questionnaire that after you have submitted your UCAS, you get from Cambridge. Now, most of it is technical questions about how many people in your class and so on. What's the size of your school, that sort of thing. But there is one part where you're allowed to write a supplementary personal statement. So one of my students in Mozambique has just applied to Cambridge to do HSPS, Human, Social, and Political Sciences. All his other choices are international relations. So he's written a personal statement about international relations. Now, the human, social, and political sciences, you can end up specializing in international relations, but you have to do that, social anthropology and sociology and other things in the first year. So in his supplementary personal statement, he wrote about how he feels that his knowledge of international relations will be enhanced by having to study sociology and social anthropology in the first year. And I have a student who did HSPS. The other interesting thing about this is that she applied to do HSPS thinking she was going to specialize in international relations, ended up specializing in sociology and now teaches sociology at King's London. So, you know, the Cambridge and other people, you know, you have to do natural sciences at Cambridge. You can't apply to do chemistry, you can't apply to do physics, you can at Oxford. You have to do natural sciences, which means 4 subjects in the first year, 3 in the second. And I've known many students who go up thinking, I'm going to be a chemist and end up being a physicist, or vice versa. So it gives you scope to change your mind when you find your real interest.
Sorry, love being on mute and trying to rattle off a question. Sardar Uyghur is asking, could you re-emphasize or flash back to the slide, which is underlining what is expected from applicants from the view of the admissions, basically the three major items. I'm not sure which page that was on. But this is, let me highlight, this is recorded. I will put it on our YouTube channel.
All right.
So you Sardar, you won't be missing anything. You'll have it available to you, if that's okay.
Let me see if I can find it. Oh, was it the three things that you need in your, well, the elements of the application are that.
I know, yeah, it's more than three. So
sorry, what was the question? What was the question about?
The question says, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, you have underlined three major items. That's very important from the applicants.
The three questions to answer in the personal statement.
Yes, these ones. Yes, exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
these questions are very important.
Yes, they are. And although you don't answer them explicitly, you don't sort of divide it into what am I applying for this course. The person reading it has got to say, right, I understand why this student is really passionate about chemistry. Yeah. And I can see what this student has done to prepare themselves by working in labs, by reading around, looking at different research projects and so on. And I know what they know what they're getting themselves into because they're aware of the amount of work that this is going to be.
Yes, thank you.
In terms of preparing for the interviews, any approaches you recommend, Francis?
There are lots of different things you can do. I mean, my students, I always arrange that they have mock interviews with people they don't know. And those people give them feedback. But they can also help each other. So I remember one year at my school in Norwich, we got 4 people got offers to do math, which is extraordinary. The hardest math course in the world, probably, and we got 4. And what they were 4 boys, there were no girls involved, unfortunately, but there were 4 boys. And what they did every week from January onwards, they had met together and given each other difficult problems to do. And then as a sort of game. And basically what that meant is they were practicing what they had to do in the interview, which was, I mean, you could do that with a humanity, that people bring a text along and say, right, let's read this and let's discuss it. You know, there are also, so you can help yourselves, you can cooperate, and the more you do that, the better.
Thank you for that. Ushik is asking, this is a really good one because this is one we've been kind of working on. She asked, what are the chances of students from the French high schools, so the Francophone high schools, not the French backward, but the, you know, the equivalent of that, to apply to Oxbridge if they have the necessary requirements, obviously like the APs and the SAT? Yeah,
I mean, as long as they've got the APs and the SATs, you can apply, yes. Any Turkish diploma is not recognized anymore. But I was reading today, the Oxford website says, if your diploma is not recognized, you need to do further study. And any of the things mentioned, the acceptable things mentioned here. So the easiest thing for people to do would be SAT and APs. Yeah.
So the 5 and 3 minimum, obviously, but then
4 in Oxford, 5 in Cambridge.
Yeah. Thank you. And then that goes not just for the French schools, but that goes for all the Turkish curriculum schools as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, so I mean, obviously the French bac is recognized by Cambridge, but not the back that you get from
Yeah.
a Francophone school in Turkey.
This is
This changed a few years ago. So it's the X that you have to study beyond.
perfect. Those were amazing questions. I'm glad, like we've got quite a lot of people, but people stayed through the whole thing. So that's I think quite nice, and we hope everybody found it very informative. Right?
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you and answering your questions.
So we want to highlight some of you work with us, you know how to get a hold of me and Francis. The remainder, I put my the company email address. If you want to get a hold of us, please, by all means, go ahead and send an email. We're on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Just WhatsApp, which is on the website. So just, you know, don't be a stranger. Just get in touch with us if you have questions, and we'll be here. We think schools need a little bit of support with the curriculum. So there's some food for thought, and perhaps if there could be a class that offers the type of writing that would help everybody here. So there'll hopefully be more information about that. If you're interested, again, send us an email. Sound good? Okay. So with that, good night to all. All right. Good night.
Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Jane. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aslı.
Thank you so much.
We
Good night.
appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Thank you very much.
So there's Ibola. Everybody else is gone. I can't remove her. She's gone.
That's gone.
So let me just